Hello everybody and welcome to 60-second murder puzzles written by whoever the fuck it was written by. Yeah, it's a book. I'm reading the book. Yeah. Let's see if we can actually get any of these. Oh, like this one. I'm not going to do it in a variety of stupid voices either. So, yeah. I was going to, but can't be asked. My first ever case, and my least favourite arrest, was to do with two brothers, the Del Gordos. Tony Del Gordo I'd grown up with. I knew him well. We'd been like brothers until we reached 15. We'd gone to the same school, shared the same dates, fought each other's battles, and told our teachers the same lies. Then Tony gone running off with some questionable gangs, and we parted company. But we kept in touch. Tony sometimes trimmed his sails a bit too close to the wind, but he just about managed to stay on the right side of the law. Then there was his brother Frank. Frank I had never met. Their mother had died when they were both small, and they had gone to live with two different aunts. Tony was with his Aunt Louisa in the Bronx, and Frank was with his Aunt Cissy in San Francisco. Though I'd never had the pleasure of meeting Frank face to face, never even seen a picture of him from Twinklehead, I knew of his reputation. Frank's reputation was big. In fact, Frank's reputation was huge. Where Tony had managed to toe the line, Frank had jumped over the edge. It started out as a small-time crook, but over the years things had gotten worse. He was never going to reform. It was a vicious circle. They put him in prison, he served his time, he came out and robbed some store. So they put him in prison again. When he got out again, guess what? He robbed the bank. And so it went on. There was a rumour that kept going around that Frank was connected. But in my experience, the mob had little trouble telling the difference between a sharp operator and a klutz like Frank. All the same, I was sorry the day that the court came from San Francisco, saying that a woman had been found dead and that Frank Del Gordo was the one with the smoking gun. He was believed to be heading back to New York, probably to get help from his family. That's why they called me. No one in the station realised I knew his brother, and I kept it that way. I don't think my personal life to work with me. It just gets in the way. In the kind of business I'm in, you don't need added complications. The way things have been for the past 2 years, I didn't have a lot of personal life to get in the way anyhow. But that's a whole other story. So I got in the car and went looking for the wretched Frank. Somehow I knew this wasn't going to be difficult. I grew up with a lot of kids who, sure as night, were heading for a life of small-time crime. I knew how they worked and how they fought. As far as I knew, Tony hadn't met up with his brother in years, but he was my first port of call. "Hey Harry, long time no see." "5 years. My wedding," I reminded him. "Yeah. How's..." He hesitated. He was trying to remember my ex-wife's name. It was Tanya. But I just shook my head, and he said he was sorry. I told him why I was calling, and from the look on his face, I could tell that he didn't know a thing. "Frank," he said, and crumpled back into his easy chair, shaking his head back and forth with him. No, not little Frankie." The grey-haired old-timer sitting in front of me, sobbing his heart out, was not the Tony I remembered. He was now a shadow of his former self, and walked with a stick now, after being hit by a truck as he drunkenly tried to find his way back home one night. In his prime, Tony had worked for Gianni Rimini, one of the richest property developers in Manhattan. Tony had been his right-hand man, his muscle, his fixer. I never liked to ask about the things he'd done for Rimini in those days. The professional side of me was happier at not knowing. When old man Rimini died, was murdered, Tony had worked for a while for his young widow, but she was killed less than a year after her old man. From there on, Tony's life had gone into slow-motion freefall. Made me want to cry. I left him in his apartment and cruised around the streets, low down on the east side. I guessed that Frank would hit here before long, trawling the bars until he came across someone he knew, someone who could get him a job. Fix him up was the way to stay. Tony had told me that there was no family left except himself, so the Frisco cops had been wrong about that. He also said that he was about the last person on earth Frank would turn to if he was in that kind of trouble, that I said he was. There was no sign of trouble, no sign of him in any of the bars, and I'd been into quite a few. I even stopped off at Jimmy's bar to see if Jimmy himself knew anything, but he was his usual genial dumb self, and professed to knowing no one, hearing nothing, and seeing even less. I was just about to give up on my hunch and head back to the station when I saw a man get out of a car and walk across a dirty bit of land where some kids were playing ball on. Something about the way he walked, or maybe his build, made me look. "Hey, mister," one of the kids yelled. "Throw us a ball." A long kick had caused the ball to shoot away from them and past the man. As he turned to throw the ball back, I saw his face. I jumped out of the car, sprinted across the grass, and flattened poor Frank before he had a chance to so much as mutter. He was so shocked he didn't even try to resist. I cupped his arms behind his back and dragged him to his feet. "Mister, you're a cop," one of the kids yelled. They'd all crowded round to watch the action and were standing staring open-mouthed. "Another day of protecting and serving," I told them, and marched Frank across to the car. Okay, so that's the story, and here's the outcome, or the questions, I guess, that you have to answer. Schultz's first arrest in New York was also his least favourite, but since he had never met Frank Del Gordo or seen as much of a picture of him, how did he manage to arrest the right man without even checking his name? I've got to be careful because the answer's written here, back to front. I've got to be careful how I read this. Yeah. Oh, the answer's so simple as well. And I'm going to leave it at that because I'm not going to tell you the answer. But let's just say the obvious answer is probably the correct one. And in my sussing out of that story, the obvious answer I thought of is the correct one. Well, I'll leave you all to ponder that story if you can understand any of it, because of my sore throat, because I'm getting a cold. And if you figure out how we knew which man to arrest, post it in the comments, and after a while I'll tell you if any of you are correct. So until next time, and what wasn't meant to say that, I was going to say join me again for another 60-second history.